So we're continuing on with the CHAIRS acronym for men. For women, I guess, more than the men specifically. But just to kind of give a quick recap, I suppose, we're doing love and respect. The things that the wife needs the most is love. The thing that the man and the husband needs the most is respect. And we find that when we treat our spouse without the thing that they need the most, we end up on the crazy cycle. So with our diagram over here, without love, she reacts in a certain way, and without respect, he reacts in a certain way. And typically, when that happens, when the wife doesn't get love, she reacts disrespectfully. The husband interprets that disrespectfully, and then he reacts without love. And it just gets you on this crazy cycle, is what the author is determined to call it. But that's where unhappiness is, not peacefulness, just anxiety and constant bickering. Little things that just kind of always are getting at each other. That's where that lives. And that lives there because we don't treat the spouse the way that they need to be treated. What we want to be on is the energizing cycle. And that's where the husband treats the wife with the love that she needs. And when she's treated that way, it motivates her to treat her husband with the respect that he needs. And when he's treated with respect, in turn, he treats his wife with the love that she needs. And it's the cycle we want to be on. We will always find ourselves at some point on the crazy cycle because we're human and we make mistakes. You're going to treat your spouse in a way that's not what they need. You're going to be selfish. You're going to treat your spouse selfishly and thereby not giving him the respect or not giving her the love. But the goal is to recognize when you're on the crazy cycle. Recognize when things aren't the way they're supposed to be, and not recognizing he or she's not doing what she's supposed to or he's supposed to, but that you're not treating your spouse the way you're supposed to. And recognizing that and being able to change it and tweak it. So we went through with the husband showing the wife love, and that was the couple acronym, going through those things. Now we're to the respect that the husband needs. We went through conquest, hierarchy, and then this week is authority. Hierarchy and authority are really closely tied together. Just to kind of give, again, a reminder of what the hierarchy is. The hierarchy is the order that God put the family, right? God is number one, right? In our marriages and our family, that's where God should be. He should be at the top. And the way that God ordained it and the way that God set up the home and the family is that the husband's next. And if we view it kind of like an umbrella, where God is our umbrella over us, the husband is the umbrella under God because that is the way God ordained it. And then the wife is under the husband, and then the children under the wife. That doesn't mean the wife is less important. That doesn't mean that the husband's more important or more special. It just means that's the responsibility order. The husband is in charge. He has the hierarchy because God ordained it that way. That doesn't mean he gets to suppress his family under his thumb and rule his family like he wants to. But it means that he has the responsibility to lead his family, to direct his family. And that's his desire. That's the way God made him. God made him to want to lead, to want to, to protect and provide. That's innate within the man, again, a good-willed man to want to protect his family and provide for his family. And that goes with hierarchy. Again, it's not to say the man's in charge of everything and everyone has to bow down at his feet and kiss his ring and do everything he says. That's not how it's set up. It's set up as in he's responsible to make sure the family is taken care of, is protected, is provided for. That's hierarchy. Now that ties hand in hand in with what we're going to talk about today, and that's the authority. So with that hierarchy, just like in any organization, there has to be a boss, right? There has to be someone in charge. If everyone's in charge, no one's in charge, and usually it ends up in chaos, right? You have to have somebody that's in charge. That's the one that everyone answers to. Again, that doesn't mean that person in charge gets to rule and reign as a dictator, but it means he's the one that you look to for leadership. He's the one that, or she in any organization, is the one that kind of steers the ship. But when it comes to the family, just like the husband is in the hierarchy order, that means he has the authority. So we're going to go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse number 22, same passage that we read last week. We're just going to read the first couple verses here, and then we'll get to more later. But Ephesians chapter 5, verse number 22, the Bible says, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body." We'll read one more verse. "Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. So he gives a couple stories here that I'm going to mention and kind of read through when in his book. So if you've read his book or currently reading his book, these are some things. So he was giving a conference and kind of doing what we're doing some teaching, and they had some question and answer time. And a wife innocently raised her hand and says, this is her statement. They were talking about authority and hierarchy. And she says, I want him to be the head. I want him to be the leader. I just want to make sure that he makes decisions in keeping with what I want. Like, that was her statement. And he's saying in the class, everyone just kind of was like, oh, and snickered and laughed. And, and she got really embarrassed by what she said, not even trying to be like, disrespectful or make a point, but she was just being honest with what she felt. She wants him to lead. She wants him to be the head as long as what he's doing is in tune with what she wants. And that story, an innocent statement, but it's, you see the irony, I guess, there that lady said. And that can be a kind of an attitude that we can have, especially as Christians. Yeah, I want to follow God's way. I want the husband to be in charge, but just make sure you don't do stuff that I'm not okay with. It's not out of malice or trying to be in control. It's just humans, right? It's just us being who we are. He gave another example, and this one sounds not as real, but a couple got married, and when they got married, they decided he would make all the big major decisions, and she would make all the smaller minor decisions. And after 20 years of marriage, he realized there's not been one major decision in their marriage yet. And, we laugh at that, and it's very funny because maybe we can see how that could be true and how that could kind of be real to life. So when you look at our marriages, right, you look at the Bible and how the Bible sets things up, and you think, okay, well, then who's the boss, right? And it's not, what's his name? I don't remember his name. Who's the boss? That's an old show. Yeah. It's an old show. Some of us probably haven't even seen it. I have. I remember I was a child. So who's the boss? Sam was the boss. See, and that's exactly the opposite of the way it should be. But culture has made it unpopular or even sexist, right, to say that the husband's the boss. Culture has said that that's not okay. You can't have the man ruling over the woman. It's an equal thing. Maybe even leans a little bit. The woman's a little smarter and she should be in charge. The husband's probably not got it all together and shouldn't be the one in charge. But for sure, we can't say he is definitely the boss because that's unpopular and even sexist. And even in Christian cultures, it can be women can bristle at that and feel like, well, yeah, okay, you're in charge as long as we're on the same page. You could be in charge as long as we've talked about it and we both agree with what we're going to do. And then you can be the one that says that's what we're going to do. And that can be an attitude that we can be tempted to have if we're not careful. When we look at hierarchy, like we talked about last week, again, we know God's order, right? We know how God set it up. He set it up specifically. And so the culture's view of the husband not being in charge and being unpopular is obviously just anti-biblical, right? It's a biblical view to have the husband be in, quote unquote, in charge, be the boss, because that's the way God set it up. And again, it's not to rule with an iron fist, but it's to be responsible for how the family is run. The headship and authority, though, can still be a sensitive subject when we get in talking about that. Oftentimes, the wife can be a better decision maker, right? In a couple, between a husband and a wife can maybe have better judgment and be better at making decisions, maybe be more confident in making decisions. And they can feel that maybe they're stuck with the concept that they have to be submissive and that he has to be the boss, even though they may feel like they got a better grasp on how to make decisions. And that may be true. Well, it may not just be her perception, but, sometimes us husbands we miss stuff. Sometimes we don't make great decisions, right? Because we're human. But in all reality, when it comes to that type of situation where the wife might feel like she's a better decision maker or even know it, it's not about that, right? It's not about the husband's ability to qualify to be a good decision maker or got to a point where he's earned the right to be a decision maker, right? It's what God has said in his word on what his hierarchy and what his order is. So when it comes to a situation like that where the wife may kind of bristle a little bit because she feels like she's got a better grasp and can make better decisions and he just doesn't do that very well. Well, in that instance, it's not really between you and your husband anymore. Now it's really between you and God. Because it's you saying, well, my husband's not qualified. He hasn't earned it. Maybe he hasn't earned it. We talked about this a few weeks ago about earning respect. He hasn't earned the respect that makes him qualified to make this decision. I will make a better choice. And so I feel like I should be the one to do that. That's you saying your thoughts, your ways are better than God's ways. And that's a difficult thing to do because you may be right in every practical sense. Maybe he hasn't earned that respect. Again, if we go back to unconditional respect, it's not about if he's earned it or not, right? It's about you doing and following God's command to reverence your husband. Just like your husband doesn't look at you and say, well, she hasn't earned my love today, so I'm not gonna love her today because she hasn't earned it. No woman would be okay with that. No woman would be like, well, I didn't earn his love today, so I guess I just missed out on it this week. No, you would expect love unconditionally because he married you. Well, God expects you as a wife to give your husband respect unconditionally because he's your husband and God has set him up that way. So it's very easy to get into the practical temptations of feeling that you've got a better grasp and can make better decisions, but really it's about following God's plan for things. Ephesians 5:21, if we backed up just a couple verses, or one verse actually, the Bible says, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God, right? And he mentions in his book that he had many people say, well, see, we're supposed to submit one to another. So that means, I don't have to give any special submission to my husband per se. It's just I submit to him, he submits to me, and we agree to get together and make decisions, together. And I don't necessarily have to follow what he says. We just submit to each other. Just like I submit to him, he submits to me. You could be tempted to think there's no specific wife to submit, even though the very next verse will completely blow that out of the water. But let's just, for argument's sake, say that, we just don't have to submit specifically because we're supposed to submit one to another. But if we submit one to another, I believe, and he talks about this too, that's not saying in the same way that wives submit to their husbands. It's when you get into conflict, and we've talked about conflict before, but when you get into conflict, the goal to resolve that conflict, right? You're going to have spats, you're going to have arguments, you're going to have fights, you're going to be mad at your husband, you're going to be upset at your wife, right? They're not seeing things the way that you see them, they're not understanding what you're saying, and you're going to get into conflict. The goal when you get into conflict is to resolve it, right? Is to restore the relationship, is to come back, take care of whatever conflict is there because it will come, but then to resolve it and restore the relationship. That's the goal. It's not to be right. It's not to win. It's to restore. And if you're submitting one to another, you're living in a lifestyle where you're willing to give your way for his way, or you're willing to give your way for her way, conflicts get resolved a lot quicker when you're not stomping your foot down saying, you see it my way and come to what I'm saying or else. But if both sides, if both the husband and the wife would both say, I'll give in or I'll give up what I want or what I believe or what this argument is about and kind of concede a little bit, and both couples do that, conflicts get resolved a lot quicker. Conflicts get resolved, right? How many times have you had a conflict where it didn't get resolved, but you still went the opposite ways, right? I mean, I've been there. You go the opposite way, you'll be like, well, that's not resolved, and I'm still upset. No, we're fine. Yep, we're fine. Have you ever done that? Are you okay? Yes, I am fine. Don't talk about it anymore. Right, loud and clear, we are fine. We are fine. Let's not talk about it because we're fine. We don't want to talk about it because we're fine. Because if we talk about being fine, we probably won't be fine very much longer. We've all been there. We've all had those arguments that didn't get resolved, and we walked away and they were just left out there because we weren't willing to concede to each other. Someone either shut down, was done, fine, I'm done. We're not talking about it anymore. Or someone was unwilling to give anything, and if you are unwilling to see it exactly my way, then we're done talking too. Those are not fun. There is no peacemaking there, right? There's no peace. There's no resolution. There's no restoration. You're like magnets, opposite ends of magnets, trying to be pushed together, and it's just impossible to do, right? One of those magnets has to flip for them to stick. Wow, that just popped. That's amazing. That's good. Should write that down. So that's submitting to one another. It's not the wives submitting. So using that verse as a way out of having to submit to your husband doesn't quite work that way. That submission is trying to get along with each other. If a goodwill husband right? We've talked about that before. The husband and the wife have goodwill towards each other, good intentions. They're not evil-willed against each other, right? And you have to believe that your husband has goodwill towards you. You have to believe your wife has goodwill and good intentions towards you. Not that they're perfect, but to assume that they don't have goodwill is to assume that they have evil intentions for you. And if that's the case, we have probably a misconception of who our spouse is, if we feel like they have evil intended towards us. Now, you may feel that way in the middle of a conflict, but if you're real with yourself and honest, that's not the case. But when a goodwill husband looks to live in a way where he cares for his wife, he loves her and shows her love, right? Even when conflicts arise, the husband looks for a way to compromise and to show love to his wife. And when conflict arises from the wife, she needs to do the same. She needs to look for ways to compromise and give and show respect to her husband. If you're in the middle of a conflict, you're fighting, you're arguing over something, you're trying to persuade the other party to see it your way, the way you submit to one another is to concede, to show, amidst conflict, show love to your wife. Show her honor, show her respect, show her that esteem her. And for your wife to show your husband respect amidst conflict, that's hard to do. Because to be in conflict and show respect kind of takes the conflict away. And that's kind of the point. If you're going to be in the middle of a conflict and still strive to show your husband respect, that means you're not stepping on his toes. That means you're not trying to push your will on each other, right? If you're showing your wife love, like actively amidst the conflict, trying to show love to your wife. That means the words you say, the actions you give in the middle of a fight, that fight's not going to stay a fight very long because you're going to see each other try to give what the other person needs. And those conflicts will be resolved. And that's submitting one to another. Okay, that's what that verse there means. But when it comes to authority, husbands are responsible to make, quote unquote, the call. Right? That's the husband's job. That's the husband's responsibility, is to make that final judgment call in any situation. It rests on the husband's shoulders. Now, that doesn't mean the wife never gets to make a decision, obviously. The husband can make the decision the wife wants. You can agree to be on the same page. You can even give in as the husband and make the decision or make the call that the wife would prefer. That doesn't, again, but it still rests on your shoulders as the husband, being the responsible one for that choice, for that decision. Okay, when love and respect are part of a marriage, right, if everything we're doing is part of how we live our life, and, you know, there have been times, Lisa and I, in the last few months, since reading this book and starting to teach this book, where we have gotten into conflicts. So I know, who could argue with me? Who knows? Yeah, right. We've gotten into conflicts, and we have both tried, but there have been a few times where I've tried to take something from this and pull it into that, like, real life. Not just like, oh yeah, it's a great book, you know, whatever, but to pull it in and use terminology. And sorry, but she's like, don't even try to pull that love and respect into this conflict right now. And it's just like, I'm trying to be real. I'm trying to practice what I teach. And, but the frustration is there because it works. That's the thing. And we get used to not living that way for real. And when we try to insert it, it gets frustrating because it works. And maybe you don't really actually want it to work at the moment, right? In the middle of the heat of the battle. You don't want necessarily a solution that is that simple. You want to kind of duke it out a little bit and make your point, right? But when you bring it into real life, when you as a husband, when you're in conflict and you look for ways to show love in the middle of a conflict, it'll change the arguments. If you get in the same argument all the time, if it's always about the same thing, if it's always about the same situation, or you did the same thing, or she did the same thing, and it comes up over and over again, and I'm guessing it happens because it happens to me, and you're probably similar to the way I am, you get into the same arguments, it feels like. Maybe different variations, but the root thing is always the same. But if you're in the midst of those trying to show love as a husband, or if you're in the midst of those and as a wife, you're trying to show respect. You're not worried about him showing love to you. You're not worried even about you being right, per se, but you're trying to make your arguments, make your position known respectfully, and give him the respect that he needs, right, that he doesn't get, that he has to have from you. And you give him that respect, that'll change his response to you. as a husband to the wife. If in the middle of a conversation and an argument, you're giving him the respect, and he sees not a defiant, stomp my foot, it's my way or the highway, life is going to be miserable if you don't do what I say or think, wife, but he sees a wife that's showing respect, he'll probably be more open to hear your point. He'll probably be more, open to try to see where you're coming from and maybe even concede. But it's when you lose it emotionally, and when we aren't doing the love and respect thing, we lose it emotionally. We overstate our position. We make a bigger deal out of things than they really are, but to make a point, right? That's when love and respect aren't there. That's how arguments go. We're emotional. We overstate things. We get angry and upset, and those emotions come out, and no love comes, no respect comes. But during the love and respect part, there's give and take. When there does come a time, though, where someone has to make a call on something, that responsibility lies with the husband. But what about when the wife strongly disagrees, right? What happens when a wife strongly disagrees with the husband on how something should be done or what decisions should be made? And these might be not often, but it's going to happen. 1 Timothy 2, chapter 12. You want to hear the most sexist verse in the whole Bible, probably. You ready for this? This is Paul, so don't get mad at me. He says, "But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression." So, in context, there's context here for this, but when it comes down to it, is everyone uncomfortable? The main point is that in a marriage, the wife is supposed to submit. This is just a confirming verse to Ephesians 5:22 and 23. They're not different, right? Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. So yes, you're to submit to your husband. You're not supposed to usurp his authority, right? He is in charge. And there'll be times where we get in conflict and we make mistakes, and we get, as a wife, you're going to usurp his authority. You're going to do things you shouldn't do. You're not going to submit the way you should, just like a husband's not going to love the way he should and be caring like he should all the time. But we do have to remember that what God says, when you usurp your authority, your husband's authority, when you go over his head, and we could have a lot of different examples, and we may talk about them here in a little bit, but when you force your position on him, right? When you even make it to where he has to choose what you choose, otherwise it's just going to be miserable if he does it for him, right? You're usurping his authority, and you're not just doing it to him, right? This is where, as a wife, you have to realize it's not about just your human relationship. It is, and that's the practical part of it and the visual part of it that you're living every day. But as a wife, you have to realize the last part of verse number 22. Whatever you do to your husband, when you submit or don't submit, when you usurp his authority, when you stomp your foot, you're not just doing it to him. God sees it as you doing it to God. So when you usurp his authority, when you stand your ground, when you're right and it doesn't matter what he says, and he can't make the decision because he just doesn't get it, he's been making bad decisions, he's just off his game, whatever the reason may be, when you stand up for yourself that way, and a lot of times as women, that's how you'll see it, is I'm standing up for my rights and myself. Even as Christian women, we can do that. You can do that. It's hard not to talk in first person. You're doing it to God. And that's where the real problem is, right? You have human relationships, you're going to make mistakes, but when you realize not submitting to your husband is like saying, God, I don't have to follow your guidance. You've given me directions. You've given me commands. Ephesians 5:33. The wife see that she reverence her husband. Yeah, but in this case, he doesn't deserve it. Or in this case, he hasn't earned it. Or in this case, I feel like I've got a better handle on things than he does. You're saying to God, I've got a better way. In this instance, not overall, God, I follow you. I believe you. I trust you. I want him to be in charge. I want him to be the leader, as long as he's doing what I want him to do. And that's the attitude you have, and you try to justify it, but really you got to think about how is it if it were the Lord, if it were God, if you were talking to Jesus. And it's hard for us to do because we've never done it. We've never spoken to God. We've never talked to him, and we believe in him, but we've never tangibly seen or felt or talked to him in person. And so it's really easy for us to kind of dismiss how we would do that. But we would never do that in his presence. When that happens, we would never think to talk that way. But we'll do that to our husbands, and he says very clearly, as unto the Lord. So when as a wife you're just want to stand your ground, you want to make a point, be careful about how you're treating your husband. Because God views the way you treat him, the way you submit or don't, as you're doing it to him. And I think if a wife will view it that way, it may change how she views her husband. And honestly, the biggest part of it is your own pride, right? We all have that. Man, female, we have pride in that we've got the best solution. But when you view it as, it's not just your husband. It is, because that's what he needs. But it's not just to him, it's to the Lord. It may change our perspective a little bit. So in these instances, I've got another verse down. 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Peter here says, likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear. So if you get to a point, you get to a decision, and this is very specific, your husband's he's not making the decision you think is right, you think is straight up wrong. It's not your place to usurp his authority, right? The Bible says you're not supposed to do that. But if you give him the respect he needs, if you live your life and obey God as the wife, do what God says the wife should do, even in situations where the husband's maybe you feel making the wrong choice, but you give him the respect he needs, you give him the respect and submit the way God says to, by the way you live your life and pray, God can get to your husband's heart. God can change his mind. God can show him maybe the error of his ways if he is making the error, or you just have to put your faith and your trust in that what God says and you obey will work. And that's hard to do. If you feel he's being wrong. Now, obviously, if he's doing something sinful or obviously anti-Bible, that's a different situation. But if you just feel the decision he's making is not the best for you, not the best for your family, but he really, really feels that way. And you've had the conversation, right? It's not just him saying my way or the highway. You've talked respectfully and lovingly, and he's still sticking with it. But you feel it's wrong. You either, well, you do. You have to pray about it. You have to either ask God to change his heart and live in a way that's respectful and submissive to him, or you have to step out in faith and maybe believe that he's doing the right thing and trust that the decision he's making is the right one for your family. And that means you have to let go of it. And that can be hard to do too, especially if you're a wife and a woman that has schedules, things set up. I'm in control. I know this happens here, there. This is the way it is. To not have control over something can be hard to do. But that's where you have to put the faith in your husband, if he's following God's word and doing the way he should do, that the decisions he's making they're on his shoulders. And that's his responsibility as the husband to lead your family. So Peter's saying having a gentle and quiet spirit can melt your man's heart. And we've talked about that before. If in conflict, from your eyes, he's being stubborn, right? And he's just not giving in. He's just sticking his ground and being stubborn, and that's how you view it. Your command is still to submit. It's not to, well, if he's being stubborn, then now the game plan changes, you don't have to submit. No, even if he's being stubborn, your call, your command is still to submit. But if your quiet is respectful and not pouty or cold-shouldered, right, a good-willed man will move towards you. Right? If your quiet spirit, your gentle, meek spirit is respectful still, not cold-shouldered, not fine, we're not talking, or pouty about what's being done, but if you're just respectful the whole time, but quiet-natured, a good-willed man, when he's given respect, will give love, and he'll move towards you to comfort you, to find out what's wrong, to resolve whatever is happening. He'll want to show you love. And there's opportunities, again, for more discussions and things. It's doing things the right way rather than yelling and screaming, you're so stubborn, you're just like your dad, you're just like your mom, whatever. You want to throw out the barbs that get thrown out in those instances. The wife that still submits to the stubborn man will bring a good-willed man, good-natured man towards her to show love. So I'll quickly, I have 3 pages. Authority comes with responsibility. What your husband needs is the acknowledgement that he's the leader. He's the authority. He needs that acknowledgement. He needs that respect. The husband needs to know that he's in charge. Not because, again, he's ruling, but he needs that respect from the wife. If he doesn't know, or he thinks every time a decision made, she's going to come in and change it or go over his head. If you have children too, your kids need to know dad's in charge. Your kids need to be reinforced that dad's in charge. Mom's in charge when dad's not here, but when dad comes home, what dad says goes. Because if you want your sons and your daughters to grow up expecting and getting respect from their wives or giving respect to their husbands, they need to see that from you. Okay, so your husband needs to know. He needs that acknowledgement. God has made your husband responsible. We won't read it for time's sake, but go down to verse 24 of Ephesians 5 through the end. It talks a lot more about loving his wife, like Christ loved the church. So he's given the responsibility. But again, he needs that respect to be able to lead. Again, we talked about before, no organization runs smoothly with two heads. It just doesn't. We have to have one person in charge. Even in your marriage, you need one person that's in charge. You have to. And God has put the man in that role. That doesn't mean he makes all the decisions. You don't get a say. It's obviously a partnership, but the responsibility lands on the man. Women can become fearful of becoming a doormat in those type of situations, that they're just walked all over. Everything, they're just told what to do. They get no say. But again, if he knows you respect his position and he knows you respect his authority, he's not going to treat you that way. Again, a good-willed man, right, that loves you, and you know he does. When you're giving him the respect and the room to lead, he will take in consideration you. He will love you. And when a man loves you and wants to lead you, he will lead you and want to love you for your best interest. Not just what he wants, but what the family needs. You'll be giving him the respect he needs, and he will then in turn give you the love you need. But to show him fear or distrust in him as a leader can create in him an attitude of, you're not going to change me, I'll do what I want. Right? If you show distrust in his ability to lead, and maybe want him to do something different, it may make him dig in and not look at you in a loving way, because distrust towards a man is disrespectful. If a husband gets a vibe that the wife does not trust his decision making and his leadership, he will see that as disrespectful, and that usually will garner an attitude of unlovingness. You're not in charge of me, and a resistance or stubbornness to any suggestion you may bring up. So be careful about how you treat that. That's, again, the crazy cycle versus the energizing cycle. I'll be quick. Let's see here. One last thing. If you see in your relationship, maybe you have a man that's often quiet or disconnected. You may see him, he just doesn't step up. He doesn't want to lead. He's quiet. He's disconnected to the family things. Maybe he's tried to step up before, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but often maybe he's tried to step up before and was told she had a better idea. He was shot down regardless of what it was. Eventually, if that happens, a man's just going to stop. He will not continue to beat his head against a wall that won't give. If he steps up, tries to make a suggestion, and you come in as a wife and just subvert it, make a different choice, yeah, but she doesn't like that, or that won't work for the kids, so we're going to do this instead. Eventually, he will stop doing that. He'll back off, and you'll see that as quiet and disconnected. Why won't he step up? Could be he's tried before. He won't assert his leadership. A good-willed man especially won't continue to assert his leadership when it's stripped away by the wife, right? If you take that away from him and he's tried, he will eventually stop. Defer and follow when you have the choice. When you have a chance as a wife, defer and follow. Support his leadership. Encourage your family to do so as well. Understand God made him with a desire to serve and to lead. We have a desire as husbands to serve and to lead. So when you can, as the wife, defer. Defer, defer, defer. That shows him respect. That shows him you're following him. That shows him he's in charge. That doesn't mean you don't get input. That doesn't mean never say what you want. But when you have an opportunity, defer to his leadership. Let him make the choice. Because a lot of times, I see it in restaurants. Something simple. Who always orders the food? If the whole family's there, 9 times out of 10, who's ordering for everyone? Mom. The wife is always ordering. Again, that doesn't mean that she's disrespectful of the husband, but the husband, you have the opportunity to lead in something simple. Usually he'll be like, go ahead. And the wife will step up and she'll do it because she's supposed to. But if you as the wife be like, no, you can, don't say, no, you do it. But defer. Let him lead. I'm not saying in all those families the husband isn't leading, but that could be the case. Let him lead. Let him be the leader. That seems silly to say, but wives, you have so much power that you have to let him be the leader. You have to submit. Because if you don't, a good-willed man is going to step back. And he won't be who he's supposed to be. All right, I'm going to wrap it up because we have 5 minutes or 10 minutes for church starts. So.